this is what democracy looks like. I guess I'll begin with telling you about some of the messages I've received, I don't think from anyone who's here. Here's one of them. While you say that you're filing a lawsuit, that takes valuable time. I believe more drastic measures are needed. Deploy the Capitol Police, the U.S. military, or even Secret Service agents with weapons to block the doors of all government institutions so Musk and his people cannot get in. Give his immediate deportation to South Africa.
Yes!
You need to chain yourself to federal buildings. Why isn't your hair on fire? It is a little singed. Please don't be cowardly at this time. You should arrest Musk for theft and breaking and entering. And
Yes.
Trump.
Yes.
While we may share some of those sentiments, and it's a church, I can't perform miracles, and neither can my colleagues. I voted to impeach Trump twice. I think he belongs in jail, not
Yes.
the White House. So while we can't do those kind of things, and many people aren't hearing about how much we're pushing back, I have great teams here in Austin and in Washington that are trying to find every way we can to push back, to listen to you and your recommendations, to respond, and to try to help as many of the people that are being hurt in the process as we possibly can on an individual basis. In that regard, somewhere around here is Stephanie Zuniga, who heads my constituent service team. Stephanie, will you raise your hand? Often when people come on down, Councilmember Vanessa Fawittis, who does if you have an individual matter, particularly for some of our federal employees, feel free to come on down and visit with Stephanie when we finish, and I'll try to talk with you also because there are many individual issues. You know, one word that is in fairly short supply these days is hope. I had the good fortune for a number of years to sit on the Ways and Means Committee right next to a great civil rights leader, John Lewis, who passed away a couple of years ago. John became almost completely bald. I used to tease him about his barber not earning his pay. And that as I would look, though, sitting there by John at the back of his head, you can still see the scars from when he was beaten almost to death on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma one bloody Sunday. And despite all that, John kept pushing on. He was hope. He was someone who recognized that even though you have failure at times, that you can never yield. And he was an incredibly optimistic and forward-looking person as we worked together in the struggle for justice. And I know that he would be here urging us on to overcome this rush to fascism. In short, what we are proposing and trying to do as Democrats, what I'm doing, is to litigate, and to motivate. On the litigation front, we just this week formed a House Democratic litigation working group and rapid response task force that's headed by my friend who some of you met, who was here with me last September, Jamie Graskin. We are seeking the most effective way to, and I believe it is the most effective way to stop some of these outrages by getting court orders. As you know, all the legislative power is vested in the Congress by Article 1. The President's duty under Article 2 is to faithfully execute the laws we pass, not to ignore them and enact orders of his own. And then our courts are to adjudicate and determine whether that's been done. And all of our lawsuits, a number of them are not only directed to Trump, but to Doge or Dodge, as I call it, since it keeps dodging. And we have, in these first now, there's some 70 plus lawsuits filed by a variety of outside groups. And we already have district court orders, as you may know, on his attempt to override the 14th Amendment and deny people who were born in this country to be U.S. citizens. We also have a number of orders, a couple came in yesterday, that deal with what happened at the Treasury, where DOJ went in and pushed aside someone who'd been there for 35 years as the guardian of our privacy and let that person rifle through our most private records, tax records, Social Security, health care data, and others. And I think it's notable the kind of people that are a part of DOJ, one in particular who was one of the leaders at the Treasury Department, who's a 25-year-old musketeer who had just recently posted, quote, "For the record, I was racist before it was cool," and urged that we quote, normalize Indian hate as he denigrated Indian Americans. He also proclaimed that, quote, "I would not mind at all if Gaza and Israel were both wiped off the face of the earth."
Oh my God.
None of this bothered Trump, who last Saturday urged that he be rehired after he was, he stepped aside. And it hasn't bothered any of my Republican colleagues who have not complained about either the taking the invasion of those records or the kind of person that was doing them. It did bother Trump a great deal that a court ordered them to stop and to put back in all the records that they had taken. Trump called that a disgrace, and he said that, quote, "No judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of decision." Vice President Vance sent up a trial balloon suggesting that the president ought not to have to follow these kind of court orders. And of course, Elon Musk said that the judge was corrupt being the word that is used for anyone who opposes their agenda without any basis, and asked if he would violate the court's order. Trump essentially said not yet, he was going to appeal first. We know that the theory that his lawyers are urging, called the unitary executive theory, that basically says we have an infallible president that can ignore both the Congress and the courts, that the better word for that than unitary executive is dictatorship, and that's what we're not going to permit. So the litigation will continue at every front. There may have been more suits filed even as we're gathered. And we don't know what ultimately will happen as they're appealed up. We have a Supreme Court, of course, that granted Trump immunity. They ignored precedent when it overruled Roe against Wade. And so there are challenges there. But we have to use that avenue to the full and hope there are some judges that will be true to their oath in the Constitution. On the legislative front, we really only have one problem. And it's the same problem that Vicki and our great legislative delegation have across the street when they are pushing back against that great trio of Abbott and Patrick and Paxton. And that one problem in a word is arithmetic. There are more of them than there are of us. So we have to work around that and find the best opportunities we can. And so let me tell you briefly just what I've been trying to do this very week. On Tuesday morning, our oversight subcommittee was set to have a hearing about some tax issues, but they said they would let us have an opportunity to hear about what DOJ was doing. Well, they didn't bring anyone from the administration or from DOJ, and so we turned that whole morning into a debate about the lack of accountability, the invasion of these records, and the harm that was caused. At the same time, one of our colleagues on a different committee actually attempted to subpoena Musk to come to Congress, but of course he was overruled by votes from the Republicans on the committee. On Tuesday afternoon, the Health Subcommittee, on which I serve, had scheduled a hearing on lifestyle medicine, something my daughter Lisa is certified in that I'm interested in, but I turned it into a hearing about the lifestyle of the rich and famous and why they were defending these huge tax breaks for those at the top while they were proposing to eliminate hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for access to physicians and vital medicines for so much of our population. Half of the children that are born out of debt rely on Medicaid. Half of the children that are seen out there rely on Medicaid, and the cuts that are being proposed are truly draconian. On Wednesday, the full Ways and Means Committee met, and the Republicans set on the agenda for non-controversial tax measures. I felt we could not continue business as usual.
Yeah,
So we used
right.
that hearing to focus almost the entire time on each of those bills, on DOGE, on the invasion of the Treasury, the many other bad things that DOGE was doing and trying to just ignore Congress and shut down total federal agencies. And by the afternoon, I secured all the other members who are Democrats on the committee to join me in what's called a resolution of inquiry, just another tool that is rarely used to try to force out of the administration all the information we can get, because we don't really know how many people there are in DOGE, who they are, whether they were cleared for security matters or conflicts of interest or whatever. And that will come up before the Congress in the next couple of weeks. On Thursday, we had a 12-hour meeting of the House Budget Committee. It took that long to defeat all 32 Democratic amendments, some of which were mine, and for them to pass a budget that makes these huge cuts in what's left of the social safety net, in educational opportunity, in medical research, in the instructions they sent out to the other committees, and at the same time to put in place a plan that will add $5.5 to $6 trillion to our national debt, all in order to finance more tax breaks for Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies. And that's what I believe is what their efforts, their cuts, and their distractions on other things is really about, is getting in place that and as little government regulation of our health and safety as we possibly can. That's what all this scheming is really about. So after that very long day, I had to get back to Austin in the worst possible way, and that would be American Airlines. It took them 13 hours to get me here a little after midnight last night. It was worth it to get home. The other major deadline that we face coming up soon is March the 14th, which is when government funding, the continuing resolution, expires to keep us operating until the end of the year. And then there's the debt ceiling a little later in the year that has to be approved to accommodate these tax breaks. Each of those provides some opportunity for us to have a say in what's happening in the House, because it's unlikely that every Republican will vote for either one. I hope that is a place to get some concessions concerning the march to tyranny. And we will be looking for every effective way, but it won't surprise me, since he did this in his first term, if President Trump doesn't shut down his own government. That time it took over a month to get it back in operation, and that could happen this time. We are 3 votes short. Indeed, for a few weeks we'll be only 1 vote short, and we're just a year and a half away from being able to correct that with the midterm elections.
Yeah.
And then there is, as I said, the third thing is to motivate. And you're obviously motivated, or you wouldn't be here. But many Americans, certainly a majority of our fellow Texans, don't agree with the concerns that brought most of us here. Apparently they're deceived by the lies, and they seem to like the idea of a strong leader who's going to come in forcefully and cut out waste, fraud, and abuse, and push those bureaucrats around in the Congress too. Indeed, one of the polls that you've probably seen is that Trump's popularity has risen to 53%. Well, think for a minute how different our gathering would be today if his popularity were at 23%. How limited he would, much more limited he would be in his ability to wreak the havoc that he and Musk are doing. There's an oft-quoted comment of Abraham Lincoln that public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Against it, nothing can succeed. Whoever molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces judicial decisions. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in that what we're doing is not just about trying to change one vote, though that's important, but to try to change public sentiment. And we've seen that that can happen. One of the few things that slowed Trump down on his outrageous immigration efforts in his first term was when Americans saw babies literally being torn from their mother's arms at the border in a cruel way, with hundreds of those children never having been reunited with their parents even today. We saw that a little a couple weeks ago when there were calls from the city, from nonprofits doing good all over our community and other governments, when there was a sudden freeze on all federal grants coming this way. And because there was an outrage, Trump had to back off. After telling us for months that on day one he was going to lower prices on groceries and everything else, nothing's happened. And you notice that while he was going to impose that 25% grocery tax called a tariff on everything we get from Mexico here a few weeks ago, he hasn't done it yet. He seems to be wavering on it. So I believe that public sentiment can be effective. It's just that a lot of people get hurt in the process while we're building that public sentiment. I think that to make a difference, it begins with our trying to convince our own families, our friends, and our neighbors, many of whom may not agree with us, that 250 years of democracy, despite all its shortcomings, has served us rather well, and we ought not to trade it for autocracy. The danger there is really So the basic question many people have said is, what is it that we can do? What can I do to make a difference? And it's the right question, but it's a hard question to answer in these times when some seem to have so much power and others seem to have so little. I'll give you one example, and I don't know if he's here this morning or not, but my longtime friend Jim Marston began just around Christmas time. Instead of the 12 days of Christmas, he had day by day 31 days of actions to take against what was happening in our country. I would say that first, you don't need to convince Democrats, and your ability to convince Republicans is pretty limited. I don't think postcards and emails and calls to some of the folks in our delegation right around here are going to accomplish anything. There may be, though he was fairly dismissive of protesters outside his office online, there may be some merit in continuing to have Senator Cornyn's office register how many people are dissatisfied with what's happening. If you live in Mike McCall or John Carter's district, I think the same thing is true there. But I find so many of the people with whom I'm serving to be true believers, like Trump, and the rest of them. I think the first people that Trump really intimidated were not immigrants, but Republicans, and they've been intimidated into silence. I think other than that contact about trying to change votes, often it feels that the first thing we can do is have a protest. Well, I've been doing that since I was a student at the University of Texas. I sometimes like to go to protest even if I'm not sure what it's about. But I think we've got to consider whether on protests and on anything else we do, is this something that's bringing more people to our side, or is it driving them away? I never quite understood what it accomplished to block a bridge so that a mother couldn't pick up her children at Zilker Elementary or Barton Creek, which happened a few years ago in protest. And I think one should use caution if the principal focus of the protest is to bring down capitalism, which I don't agree with anyway, but I think it kind of raises some questions about whether we're going to win people over. I would also say nationwide, I think Trump wants nothing more than to provoke an incident where he can bring in the military to suppress protests, even if they're stirred up by provocateurs from his brown shirts and the Oath Keepers. Third, there is always power in numbers. And so if there's any organization that you're a part of that has not spoken out on this, which is probably almost all of them, this is an opportunity to raise the questions and begin to debate what's happening. The intimidation, of course, has gone far beyond Republicans. Most of the people that call and tell me they have a really specific problem with a business or a nonprofit or a government agency say, but don't mention my name. You never saw a better example of the intimidation and how it's worked than in the confirmation this week of Robert Kennedy. You could not find, despite his policies, you couldn't find a healthcare organization, the medical association, the pediatricians, you couldn't find anybody that was willing to go out and oppose him other than the American Public Health Association and the National Nurses Union. So I think we need to use those groups to elevate the discussion and to try to get group action. I think that I've seen in looking at the messaging that's going on social media that every time I post something, I mainly get just a horde of folks on from the MAGA camp, trolls, except on Blue Sky and on Threads, but I think a presence on all form of social media about these issues is really important. And then when you are personally impacted or know someone who has what's going on, it's really important to let us know so we can tell those stories and individualize the harm that's being caused and share that, whether on Nextdoor or telling friends and neighbors is important. I think it's important to support groups like those we work on litigation, like the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, Public Citizen, Democracy Forward. There are many others. And then the burden is going to be great on some of our local officials, particularly at the city and county level, especially if they try all these mass deportations to take people that are working and contributing to our community and removing them, not because they're violent criminals, but because it doesn't fit with Trump's dogma. And I think standing up and supporting and letting those public officials know that they have the support of this community to be a welcoming community is really important. There's much more to be said, but as I said, I didn't come to preach. And where have we got some microphones set up so people may have sent cards in? People can come up. Jocelyn, Angela? Okay. So I invite your comments, questions. We've got a couple of microphones we can pass around. I believe there are some written comments, but I'm glad to hear from individuals who are here who want to speak out. If we don't get some soon, I'll take whatever's in your box.